Okay, here we go. I give you two for one. How about that? That'd be okay? Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome you to class here. We are in Acts chapter 20. And hopefully you've had a chance here to get a set of handouts. Thank our brother Brian Applewhite for helping me with that this morning here. If you can, we'll try to look on with these and we'll go ahead and get started with class. I know we'll probably have some visitors passing through town, perhaps for the holiday weekend, and we thank you so much for your attendance here this morning. Let's talk about the old gospel ship. You know, ships are used as a mode of travel, primarily in the Bible. Obviously, you're going to be to get to point A to point B, and Paul uses them a lot. The Lord's church is like a ship that, and we'll start on the right-hand side here, or go clockwise fashion. It has a wireless system. You remember the Titanic. One thing that, helped save those that were able to get to the lifeboats, they were able to send out a wireless message to get to other ships, to expedite what they could to get there, to get the remaining lifeboats that had, survived, or had those passengers. It has the compass, right, to guide the ship home. It has a tug. You remember the boat that crashed, unfortunately, this past year in Baltimore. But apparently, one thing that they're going to look at doing for those big container ships is making sure that they have tugboats, okay? Our boats have a captain, right, who monitors the course. Our captain is Christ, and the pilot is the Holy Spirit. It has an anchor that holds, and sometimes we sing the song, we have an anchor that holds. It has a compass. It has a gangplank that is wide enough to accommodate all who would enter. Let's go to the next page here. The four major journeys of Paul. I had the first missionary journey listed there on the right-hand side of the page. It tells you the passages that are used, the duration, the total miles traveled, 1,200 miles. 1,200 miles is a lot even today. But can you imagine, without having access to automobile, without having access to airplane, they cover that by land and by sea. We're going down, we are in actually the third missionary journey, which is about here to conclude here with Acts chapter 20 and chapter 21. Yes, daily Bible readers. Thank you, Doug. Let's look at the next page. How about successful traits in the life of Paul? Paul was a happy individual. Paul motivated others. Even the letters that he wrote that we use today helps motivate us 2,000 years later. Paul was persistent. Paul was a positive thinker. He had to have this trait. Paul unfortunately had some things in his life, before he was converted that he had done that were, terrible to Christianity, but he had to overcome that. He had to be a positive thinker. He was radiant. Paul was satisfied with what he had, to be content. You can read that in Philippians chapter 4. Paul was optimistic. He was disciplined. Paul knew the source of his power. And finally, let's come to the last page here. Unfortunately, you may not can see the top of the page here, the 7 churches of Asia. Okay, you remember the book of Revelation, and we covered that last quarter under Robbie. But one of his chapters that he covered was Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3. Talks about those letter to those congregations there. And one of those congregations was Ephesus. And unfortunately, Ephesus had fallen away by then, okay? It was known by then as the loveless church, okay? But, for the time being in Acts chapter 20, that's not the case, okay? So apparently they had, some things that were to happen to them later on. So anyway, but I hope you get some benefit out of these sheets. Let's get into Acts chapter 20. We're wrapping up here Paul's message to the church in Ephesus. He's actually speaking to the church in Ephesus, but he's actually right here. I think it would be Miletus, I believe, which is somewhere I would have to get closer, even myself, because even I have a hard time seeing this. But it's right outside Asia Minor, right in here. And he's in a city called Miletus. And that's where he is speaking to these elders here at Ephesus. He's concluding his message. We'll be in Acts chapter 20. We'll start with verse 36. And we'll go through the end of the chapter. And when he's thus spoken, he kneeled down and prayed with them all. And they all wept sore and fell upon Paul's neck and kissed him, sorrowing most of all for the words which he spake, that they should see his face no more. And they accompanied him unto the ship. So here he's going to be leaving, and true enough, it's a very sad, very somber occasion. It's not to be confused with worldly sorrow, but what? Godly sorrow. Paul had some sweat equity. He had spent about 3 years with this particular congregation in time, and we think that they fear for his personal safety. He's going to be eventually heading back to Jerusalem. That's where he wants to go, but that's where they fear for his personal safety, okay? But Paul has the courage there to continue to go on with his journey, and he'll, cross that bridge when he gets to it. He's built a bond with these individuals. A couple of weeks ago, we had the spiritual sword lectureship. It lasted just 1 week, okay? But we had speakers both in the morning and in the afternoon, or primarily then in the evening. And over that period of time, you have visitors coming and going. It's a chance to meet people throughout the brotherhood. And after 4 or 5 days, you build up a bond with those individuals, don't you? And you hate to see it when the time comes to end. It's sort of sad to see some of those brothers and sisters leaving that you've spent time with. But think about this. This is individuals that you've spent a total of 3 years with. So it's a very difficult time. But the work must go on, okay? Now, let's get into chapter 21 here. And it came to pass that after we had gotten from them and had launched, we come with a straight course unto Kos, and the day following unto Rhodes, and from thence into Patara, and finding a ship sailing over unto Phoenicia, we went aboard and set forth. Now when we had discovered Cyprus, we left it on the left hand and sailed into Syria and landed at Tyre, and there was a ship was to unlade her burden. Okay, that term, unlaid her burden, what would that be? The ship apparently must have been, we take it, perhaps not a passenger ship, but what would be the other kind? A cargo ship, right? And if it was to unladen her load, apparently ships used to be referred to in a female sense because some of them were named after, female goddesses at that time. But if she were to unlay her burden, that means what? That she's going to be unloaded as a cargo ship. Now, if Paul is on that cargo ship, does that have the same amenities as a passenger ship? No, it does not. So therefore, we assume then that Paul is going to these places, on standby, if you will, not the most comfortable of accommodations for him as a passenger, but the sacrifices that he is making as a missionary to spread God's word. So we should not necessarily always take it that we have to go first class anytime we have to go somewhere as well, right? That there's nothing wrong with us, not necessarily going, first class to someplace, okay, to spread God's word. But that's what he is doing here. Now, going back to verse 1, it said they sailed a straight course unto Kos. We take it that the winds must have been favorable. That's what he's talking about right there, a straight course. He's going to come down into these, eventually to Rhodes. So what Paul is doing here is what? He is taking this opportunity here, probably visiting Christians located here in these various cities here. And it talks about how he's going to sail, and it talks about where Cyprus being what? To his left. So therefore he must be going south of this island. Now, if you remember, where was his first missionary journey to? It would have been to where? It was actually to Cyprus. But this time he's going to sail along the side, passing down through here. But the point being, if he's taking this opportunity to go by these places or to visit perhaps some of these other Christians, it's an opportunity for him to build up these congregations. Now, any questions or comments before we go on and read verses 4 through 7? Okay, let's look at these for a second here. And finding disciples, we tarried there for 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. And when we had accompanied those days, now notice Luke must be with them because he's talking about what? In the sense of we. We departed and went our way, and they all brought into our way with wives and children, till we were out of the city, and we kneeled down on the shore and prayed. And when we had taken our leave one of another, we took ship, and they returned home again. And when we had finished our course from Tyre, we came into Ptolemais and saluted the brethren and abode with them 1 day. Okay, so here he is. He's going to be leaving one destination here. But notice who comes out to pray with apparently the other members? The wives and the what? And the children. So, based upon this and based upon, other texts in the Bible, you remember when in the Old Testament, Joshua, after they had entered the Promised Land, one thing that he had the Israelites to do was to get on 2 different mountainsides, and he made sure that what? It just wasn't the men only, it was what? The men's, the wives, all the children together, that they read God's law there together. And here we have an occasion here where they pray together as well. So therefore, we can see the emphasis on making sure that we try to get families, as much as we can, our entire family, whether it be aunts and uncles and cousins and nephews and nieces, as much as we can, getting them involved in the worship of God. Okay? And here they are praying on this occasion. They kneeled down. Different positions that we can pray in, right? I think of what? Standing. Don't we stand up sometimes to pray? We sitting sometimes to pray. Here they are kneeling. What other position can a person be in? Sometimes a person can be in a prostrate position. What's that, laying down on the ground? But people have done that before. To show their sincerity, to show their deep affection towards God, to, the serious of the moment. But sure enough, here they are kneeling down. Now, if they are up on the shore, this must have been a public place, not inside a facility, but outside. Do you think that makes an impression upon others who are watching that from a distance? It sure does. Okay? So then we shouldn't necessarily be timid when we go out to eat before we have a meal to what? To offer up what to God? Thanks in the mode of prayer. Okay? Any questions or comments here about what we've read here so far this morning? Now, in our remaining moments here, what's been going on here? Paul has been going to visit these places, and now he's worked himself down here, and he's eventually about to go into, he's getting closer to Jerusalem. He's right here on the shoreline here. But what's happening here is he's building up these congregations here. He's going, and we would say he is visiting these congregations here. And one thing that we should be a part of our work here for the Lord's church is what? To go out and to visit others. James 1:27. Okay? So I thought we might look at some other passages which stress this here in our remaining moments here this morning. Let's flip back here. Let's go back and look at the book of Matthew. Let's go back. First of all, how about the example that Jesus set, Matthew chapter 8, verses 16. Visiting the sick, it says in Matthew chapter 8, verse 16, and when the even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed and devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that were what? All that were sick. So even the example that Jesus said, we can see about going out and visiting those that were sick. Who about the Sermon on the Mount? Did it have something to say about it? Go back a couple of chapters before. Let's look at Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have not savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is therefore good for nothing, but it shall be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill that cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it shall giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So we realize here that going out and visiting can help the sick. Now, we can't do necessarily miraculous things for them, but we can pray for them, can't we? And did you know, then, of course, it doesn't take people even in outside the world, outside the church, would even own up to the fact that a person that is cared for by genuine love and affection of others generally has a faster recovery time than one that is not. But if it helps those who are sick to be visited, who about the person who spends their time and effort to go out and visit those who are sick? Does it help that person as well? Sure it does. If you've ever had the opportunity to go and do that, I would, highly recommend that, right? It's an excellent way to feel better about yourself. Is to go out and spend time. Go out and maybe, find out if there's somebody in need. Go and do that person, a favor. You'll feel better even about yourself. But who about the church? We need to show as a congregation here that we have love for our community. We used to be involved with that work here where we would take food and, of course we would always, ask people, tell them they're invited to come to worship with us. But I'm talking about it was mainly just taking sandwiches down to the ICU family unit down there at Erlanger Hospital, I believe it was. And Debbie, we used to run into you because Debbie, you worked down there one time or worked in the lab across from that. But spend time and effort doing that, getting the word out to the community. Hey, we're trying to, do this as a work for the community. Where do we see this best illustrated? Let's flip a couple of chapters over. Let's look at Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25, and we'll pick up with verse 31, okay? When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, and shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, and the goats on the left. And then the king shall say unto them, unto his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. So, this is apparently a picture of what one day it's a figurative picture, but what's literally going to come for us one day involving the judgment. It's going to separate the sheep from the goats, right? But what's going to be the measuring stick? Now remember, this has been in place, not just something that's been thought of by God, as something on the fly, but what? Something before the foundation of time itself, right? Go back to verse 35. For I was hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. So therefore, we can see that sometimes people are in a situation where, true enough, they do need the gospel, but they may have what? They may have more pressing needs first. And those pressing needs may be what? Food, water, and perhaps even shelter itself. Okay? Now, our ultimate goal is to get them to the gospel, right? But for the time being, they may need something else. And we've seen this being played out here not too far from here up in North Carolina, right? Parts of East Tennessee have had tremendous damage, right? But there's been an emphasis here, upon people to try to get some resources up there where they can have those. Okay? Now we're going down here. Verse 36, naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. First of all, sick. Are we supposed to go out and visit those who are sick? Well, sure we are. Now, We're supposed to take adequate precautions, right? And we've seen that being played out on these past few years with COVID. There might need to be some adequate precautions we need to take even today. But we take those and we try to make arrangements to have food delivered out on a porch if needed, but to let that person know that they are cared for. Now, the part that I was in prison, some people truly may be there because they're truly, guilty of doing some crime, but we need to make sure that while they're in an atmosphere, while they may have time on their hands, that they have the gospel before them. And that's a time for them to straighten out their lives, where they can make things right with God and perhaps make things right with their fellow man, to not just have worldly sorrow, but to have godly sorrow. Okay? Left off with verse 37. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave drink? When have we saw thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, and clothed thee? Or when we saw thee sick, or in prison, came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these brethren, ye have done it unto me. So the message being, when we do these things, no matter perhaps how small society may view that person, who is in these circumstances, we make sure that we carry out as much as we can, carrying out the Lord's work. And when we have done it to these individuals in these difficult situations, it's the same equivalent to doing it to who? To have done it to Christ himself. And that's what we've got to keep in mind. Now pick up with verse 41. Then shall he say unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungered, and ye gave me no meat. I was thirsty, gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me not in. Naked, and ye clothed me not. Sick, and in prison, and ye visited me not. Then shall they answer him, saying, Lord, when we saw thee and hungered, or thirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee, then shall he answer them, saying, Verily, I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of these least of these, ye did it not unto me. Verse 46. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. So here he flips the other side of the equation. On these occasions where we've turned you've heard the term a blind eye, or what do we call it? Sometimes give somebody the cold shoulder. Perhaps when we've had the opportunity to do good, we need to make sure that we don't put ourselves in that situation. We need to make sure that we always go the extra mile. And to those people that are traveling, who may be away from home, No doubt they reached out to the Apostle Paul to have helped him during his needs, right? And that may have been something to was walking to a ship, making sure that he has the things that he has to have to travel to the next place. Because remember, he may be carrying, some money perhaps eventually to get to Jerusalem, helping out those Christians there who are in a time of need. And we need to make sure that we always have the same attitude as well, and to avoid the attitude of looking the other way. Okay? Any questions or comments before we go on about these particular verses right here? Okay. Very beneficial, right? Now let's look at some things that can make us effective as Christians here as far as carrying out our visits here within the congregation. The visits need to be long to be effective. When we go out and visit somebody, who hasn't been here for, or who may be in the hospital per se, does that visit need to be long to be effective? No, that visit can be something short and sweet, can it? It can be going by the hallway and, perhaps, or making ourselves known before we come, perhaps giving somebody a heads up or something. But it can be effective as just dropping by to say hello to someone and checking in. That can make a world of difference, can it? And perhaps somebody who hasn't been here in services here, we can pick up our phones and we can sometimes call them or even send them a text if we haven't seen them in worship services in a while. So we can see here that there's not necessarily that short and brief can be effective. Now, perhaps it is someone who is suffering a medical condition. Is it my position as a fellow member to, question some of their medical problems, to pry into their medical conditions? Is that any of my business? No, it is not. Okay? And we need to make sure that we have, and most of us surely, realize that, but we need to make sure that, we don't pry into people's personal information. Now, even beyond that, some people even question the medical advice that they receive from doctors and lawyers, or doctors, from the medical advice from the medical community. Do we, as fellow members, need to question any of that advice? No, we have got no business at all getting into all that, right? But things that we can do is to what? To help keep them up on what's happening within the congregation. To ask them about how their family members may be doing. Something, is something, maybe something, as far as what's going on within the congregation, as far as some of the good mission works that's going on. Those are things that will help build up individuals, okay? Right. Right. That's That's right. That's right. Just being there. But there again, though, the situation or how well you know that individual may dictate, how how far, that you can get into. But one thing that you should try to always maintain, is a positive disposition, to help that person as much as you can. And you talk about, bringing food. I just remember, as a child, my father went through, a long-term illness with cancer, which he succumbed to. But it made just the biggest impression upon me. And just being, even before a teenager practically, about the members of the church who went out of their way, to go and make sure, that we had food there at the house. And I'm talking even way before the funeral. I'm talking about, all those, months and years leading up to that, people going out of their way, looking out for me, as a young lad in the church. But that's what you get when you get into the church. Now, that doesn't mean that people are going to always handle things, 100% perfectly. But you miss out on that love and attention when you're not a member of the Lord's church, And it's sad that people, withhold themselves from that. And then you talk about, and you alluded to it, people that can build you up, fellow members that, go out of their way to help you out, that can make you feel better about yourself, in the recovery time involved. Any questions or other comments here about this passage here that's involved? In closing here, let's look at another one here. If you have your New Testament there, go to the book of James. And we talked about James, and we'll look at verse 27. James chapter 1, verse 27. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Try to leave that passage this week. Look for opportunities to do good. Here we are in the month of November, Thanksgiving. One thing we ought to be thankful for is each other. But try to reach out to people. Figure out a way, that you can, perhaps let someone know that, they are appreciated. Maybe see some sort of need that they may have. Look out for that. We can see that being played out here, in the book of Acts with these fellow members of the church, caring for Paul, loving him, wanting to do anything for him, even praying for him, praying with him, okay? We can see that. Make sure that's a part of your lives as well. Listen, I thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for your comments here this morning, and we'll see you back here again this evening, not at 6, but what time? 5 o'clock, okay? Thank y'all so much.